Alright, so I'm back here for another update. I apologize at the length of time between these. It's just, there's been a lot going on with this project, a lot of which has just sort of been being on the phone, sending emails, doing design work in CAD, which is like something that is difficult to keep people interested in if you share it. So as a result, there has been a lot of stuff going on in here, but just been kind of caught up in that, making sure that the things I want to do are possible. So that's the reason why there hasn't been a new video, but I'll try to do those every 2 weeks from now on, as I have been. But that's the reason why. But anyway, if you are not familiar, I have the list. If you are not familiar with this project, I haven't seen the rest of the videos on my channel. I'm building an all-wheel drive, lightweight hybrid sports car that right now is powered by a BMW K1600 bike engine in the back, so it's mid-engined. The front axle is electric. I'm sitting in the mock-up right now. That, because of changes I'll tell you later, is getting like less and less useful. Well, still, it's actually still extremely useful. It's just less and less representative of what's actually going to be on the road. Some pretty major changes have happened. I want to put it out there. I mean, I've probably said this before. I'm not one of those people who just like chases changes in projects until it's perfect. I'm not going to let perfect be the enemy of good here. But in order to make this manufacturable and repeatable, some changes had to be made because the current iteration of the chassis was just kind of getting ungainly, and there was a lot of unknowns. So I switched it up, and I'm a lot happier with it now. I'll show you what it looks like, but yeah, it's a lot better. It is a ton more elegant, and I'll go into that later. But I'll go into some stuff that I can actually show you in the real world first. So the first big thing that's been going on is the suspension. So I am still at the front here because, so last time I talked, I had the basic suspension pushrod geometry mocked up, I think. But effectively, that was working okay. I actually have the axle mocked up. It's all spinning and everything is very happy, and steering. That's the other update, is that the steering is now functional. But I had to redesign the fork. I'm actually still redesigning it. So the axle comes into the C5 spindle. You need clearance for that, which it was never originally designed for. You have to make all these funky parts to kind of get the suspension down to that control arm while avoiding the axle. So I'm sure it'll take more redesign, but I'm on a current iteration now. It's pretty good. It's just a matter of getting it like cost effective, so I'm working on that a lot. And yeah, I mentioned the steering. So steering, a lot of progress has been made there. So it's not in right now, but I have the column in. I'll put some pictures up of that. It's a collapsible column, so it's nice and safe. Still working on the column mounting. That's like a tricky one, but I have it in a good basic spot. It's just like ergonomically. It's just about getting the right pieces in the right place to do the most those pieces can. Add some rigidity to make sure they're good for dash mounting, all that kind of stuff. So once you get into that area where the mechanical parts of the car start interacting with the interior, things get a little more tricky, but I'm kind of stuck in the middle of that right now. And then I mocked up the steering wheel. It ended up being, it's a thin wheel, just for mock-up purposes, and it's actually very similar size to the one in my C7, but it seems big for this. We'll see how that works out. Honestly, I'd rather have a big wheel for the mock-up, just for ergonomic purposes. But yeah, it's actually sitting next to me right here. It's a little big right now. I put the smaller one on the way to test that as well. It's about 1.5 inches or an inch smaller. So we'll see how that works and feels. But that's all going very well. The steering situation is, it's a C5 outer tie rod and a BRZ rack, and I think it's an Outback inner tie rod. Is it Outback or WRX? I think it's Outback. But the thread pitch on the inner and outer tie rod is the same between the C5 and the Outback. I think a lot of those are like M14. They're all very similar. So that's good. I don't have to do a thread adapter or anything, and that's steering fine. Getting some good articulation out of it. So the angle is good, so I'm pretty happy with that. The other big thing that I finalized, at least for now, is the battery. So the battery, I got the enclosure and everything. It all fits well. I got the bus bars. I had to do some changes to the bus bars. Just, you never really know how something is going to go together assembly-wise. until you assemble it, which kind of sounds silly, but the battery, a lot of the bus bars were sitting close to the case of the battery, which I didn't like at all. I don't think they could touch. Well, actually, I thought maybe they could, which is why I changed it. So I made the bus bars a little bit smaller. They're still really thick, like an eighth inch thick. Easily could carry all the current still. Um, but I changed those, and then I installed the BMS on there, and it's all cased up. It's looking nice. There's some tape on it now, just as a temporary cover for the bus bars. But that's all going very well. Very happy with that. I just have to reconnect all the BMS leads, which I'm not looking forward to. But the battery is looking really, really good, so I'm pretty happy with that. The other thing on the electronics front is that the Victron stuff I'm going to use for battery monitoring, other things showed up. Mixed, so the stuff works fine. The display I wanted to use as the kind of dash display, the Victron software, for whatever reason, thinks it's like portrait. So it just doesn't look right. To be fair, I'm using kind of a strange display for it. I thought it would look very cool. I'll probably end up just, there's no way to rotate it before anyone asked. I've looked into that really heavily. But whatever, maybe they'll update it where it's rotatable. I asked them to do that on their forum. I asked about it on Reddit. But in the meantime, I'll just switch to a regular display. It's not the end of the world. That's going well. Again, so that's the shunt. So that'll do the current out of the battery. It'll give me battery state of charge, all sorts of information. It can manage fluid levels, temperature sensors, all wirelessly. So it's handy for a lot of stuff. And that's going to be like a kind of systems-wide management for the vehicle. So yeah, that's going well. And I just ordered a lot of stuff, some of which of it has showed up. On the electronics front, the engine wiring harness is now in my garage. I've been thinking more about the engine stuff as I get to the back of the vehicle. I'm not sure how easy the stock ECU is going to be to manage. I just want it to work, right? I just want the engine to run. So I mean, if I don't have to fiddle around with a standalone ECU, then great. But again, for the sake of gauges, other stuff, it's just like, should I just go with a standalone? I don't know. Either way, I'm going to need a harness. I did order a stock ECU, but we'll see if that works out. If I can find some good diagrams for it, we'll see. It's just a Bosch unit, but if anyone actually, I'll ask you guys, if anyone has any good information about the ECU they use for those bikes for BMW, it's a K1600 ECU, but I feel like I think they use it on a lot of other bikes too. If anyone has good information working with those, please let me know, because I need all the information I can get before I decide to go to a standalone. It would make my life a lot easier if I could just get some basic information out of the ECU, just plug in some sensors and just get it to work. I would be so happy if that was possible. The other thing that's on the way is the exhaust, so the headers are on the way. You'll see the chassis in a little bit. It'll give you some other information on that. But the exhaust, at least one of the headers runs straight into a frame rail at the moment, which, I kind of knew I would need some kind of custom exhaust solution from the beginning. I was just kind of dreading it. So I'm going to have to rescan the engine with the exhaust on it and then just kind of see how that works out. I think one of the headers will actually fit fine as stock. Whether that means, just both of them have cats on them. I like to maintain the cats. So it's going to have to be a custom exhaust probably. I'm just not looking forward to it. I don't like doing a ton of custom parts for this thing. It just adds to the cost. It's like, I get this cool 3D printed thing, but it's like, it just costs so much money. And it's like, the idea is that this will be reasonably priced. So it's like, yeah, it's cool or whatever. You order some cool, 316 stainless printed part, but in the end, it's like just costing you money. So yeah, that's another thing to figure out. And I'm just going to have to go through that. But anyway, let me go into the big thing here, the chassis. So when I started this project, I was stuck on doing a bolted and bonded chassis. There's advantages to that. The big one is you don't have to weld. When I started, I didn't want to have to learn how to weld. I felt like it was a variable that, I didn't want the success or failure of this project to be hinged on my own welding skills. But as it turns out, bonded joints are tricky too. you need a lot of fasteners. At least I'm an amateur in designing these bonded structures. Yeah, I've done it a lot. But, it's like one of those things where to do it really elegantly, you need to be really, really smart. And I'll have a lot of experience doing it, which I don't have. So the first thing I did was I decided to go to a welded chassis, which was a big deal, which I didn't want to do. Um, but it was really, really for the best. So the bonding was the adhesives are expensive. The processing takes time. You have a lot of fasteners that need to be, installed properly. The weight of the fasteners, the amount of joints I had in this thing was just getting extreme. Going to a welded chassis, first off, even if I didn't make other changes which I made, at least minimizes the amount of bolted joints. And the fasteners were actually costing a fair amount of money and added up to a fair amount of weight, which you might not believe, but was the case. The other thing it allowed was to go to, and this is a big deal, to go to Mandrel-Bent rails. So mandrel bending, if you don't know, is they bend the tube around a form and there's a mandrel inside the tube. It's like covered in grease. It's kind of gross actually. But it supports the inside of the wall of the tube. So when you bend it, you get this nice square section all the way through. The part's like super sweet. The problem is, and this is what I've been doing for like the past 2 or 3 weeks, is that there is no instant quoted Mandrel-Bent tubing service, at least for square tubes. And the stuff for round tubes, in like Xometry's case, is super overpriced. Like, just heinously overpriced. And using round tube was just something I didn't want to do for a lot of reasons. I will not go into those reasons. It's just a plethora of reasons. So finding a square tube mandrel bending service that will actually give me a quote for the amount of rail that I need, which is a small amount for prototypes, was really hard. Getting manual quotes is like such a prehistoric process. It's just infuriating. Eventually I did find a good company though. And so I started with a 2x4 rail, which would have been cool. Very, very stiff. Seemed like nobody really mandrel bends those though. So I switched to a 2x2 rail, got a couple quotes. Finally, a good company came through. They're like, yeah, we can do this rail. Sent me a complete quote. They gave me a call, which was awesome. The problem was that none of these companies list what kind of tooling they have on their website, which seems pretty stupid, but it's just kind of how it works. It's kind of amazing. So I designed it with a 10-inch centerline radius, all the tubing, and as it turns out, they had a 6-inch die to pull it around. So effectively, I got a quote for one part with one radius, and the radius is like integral to the entire design of the chassis. So when I got it back, and they're like, okay, we just changed it to a 6-inch CLR. I had to redesign the whole thing, which is why the video was delayed. But after all that was done, and after I got all the holes back in, I'm approaching like a completed rail now, which is really, really cool. All these kind of design changes I put into the rails really fell into place. So I gotta stick to the list here. So I've done a couple takes on this and I just start rambling. So the individual rails replace like 3 or 4 pieces each, which is a big deal in terms of cost and assembly, also a big deal in terms of fixturing. Just huge, just awesome. They have all the mounting holes on them, which is big. It's much cheaper at scale. So I can get these whole rails, instead of the cost of 3 or 4 parts, it's the cost of 1 part. And that really doesn't add up until you get into higher quantities. That's okay. The rails now are the same part left and right. So as it sits, I'm already getting a quantity discount just for getting 2, which is awesome. If I can make the rails the same on the bottom and top, that would be a big deal. It's just not possible, unfortunately. So the scaling thing is big. Faster to put together, lighter as well. This chassis was really getting heavy. A big reason for that was the wall thickness on a lot of the tubes. A lot of the bulkheads are tube, and it's just heavy. There's a lot of hardware in here. There's a lot of pieces to support the bonding. You need these big faces coming up against each other to get effective bonding. and that was just adding weight. I've saved between 1 and 200 pounds on this chassis, which is great. Um, it's going to come in under 400 pounds. It's around 300 right now. I still have to add some stuff, some cross beams, some other minor stuff, mounting bosses, all kinds of little stuff I have to add, but definitely under 400 pounds, which is awesome. And the design optimizations. So when this project is done, I'll do a video about what it's like to design a chassis from scratch. Hopefully, if I finish this project, I'll do that video. But one thing you learn is that you go into a project like this with a lot of goals, a lot of particulars you want to hit. And it's like everybody goes in to a fight with a plan, then you get punched in the face. Well, it's true for designing cars, at least when you're doing it for the first time, because there's just so much knowledge around designing cars that no one ever tells you about. It's like, oh, how much space do you need for a person? Like, it's just all kinds of little stuff like that. Say you're designing a Corvette and you're on your 5th generation Corvette, and a lot of the people who are there have been there for at least 2 or 3 generations. They all know that stuff. They don't have to explain it to you. There's no one when you do this to explain that to you. And I hope one day to be able to explain that to somebody. But effectively, I was on my 7th iteration of the chassis, and there was still assumptions from like the previous generations of the chassis in there that just weren't helping me at all. Like even locations of rails. Like, why is this here? Like, there was no good answer. Switching to the Mandrel-Bent chassis allowed me to just throw a lot of that stuff out, and there was a lot of improvements to go along with it. So the suspension mounts got cheaper and more rigid, and a lot simpler. And in a lot of cases, I could duplicate the mounts either left and right, or there's like 8 suspension mounts basically per front and rear subframe for front, rear, third. And the more you can make those just the same part, the more money you save on them. And basically, I was able to do that really effectively in this time around by moving the rails. And they're more rigid, the loads going into the rails are a lot better. Just a ton of stuff like that. And also translated into the steering rack mount. So steering rack mount in this current version of the chassis actually is only in single shear. It's actually only in single shear in the BRZ. And with the new rail design, I was able to go to double shear in the steering rack. So that's just a big, you want good steering feel, consistent steering feel. That's a big help for that. It helped the steering design a lot too, just like the routing of the steering shafts, all kinds of stuff like that. Just helped out a lot. And the steering rack has been moved actually. So the rails sit lower now on the bottom, they're not as thick, which means I can mount the steering rack lower with the diff in the same position, which means I can move the rack further back, which also helps with mounting, helps with the tie rod angle, all kinds of stuff like that. So just a huge win back there, or up there. And then in the back, the engine mounting on this thing has just never been great. And I just kept putting it off, and I never wanted to get around to it. I mocked it up a little bit, but I just kind of was really dreading going into it. With these new rails, the engine mounting is going to have to change because of the exhaust, as I touched on before. But it just got a lot easier, and I'm just really, really pleased about that. Just the mounting, the actual mounts themselves got very simple. I can duplicate them in the case of the rear engine mounts. The positions you can mount them in, the clearance for a lot of stuff, just ended up working out a lot better than previous designs. The rear diff mounting has been improved. Just so many things got better. And one of the big things I've been struggling with was the pedal mounting. This is like the pedal mounting in the current iteration is okay. They're floor mounted pedals. The position of the master cylinders for everything is just like so. But the new design allowed me, because I don't have these big bonded like towers in the front of the car anymore, I can move the floor forwards, or the firewall forwards, which gives me a longer floor. And because I have that space, because the firewall is further forwards, I can top mount the pedals instead of floor mounting them, which most cars already do, or a lot of them at least. And that just improves the ergonomics, provides more leg room, just a lot of stuff like that. So switching to the Mandrel chassis just was huge. And then, yeah, it took a lot of time, but um, it's going to be a lot easier to scale this, and it's going to be a lot easier to assemble. The ergonomics are better. It's just like a waterfall of things. So it was a great opportunity. Solved a lot of problems. It all, still a couple little problems to solve, but it's just a lot easier. It's more rigid. It's a lot of stuff. So it all panned out really well. But so moving forwards, all right. So I'm setting a goal for myself. I want to have this thing on the road by the end of the summer. I've scraped some money together. I have a lot of the parts are coming in now. I've ordered a lot of stuff. The speed of this is increasing. Um, with the change to the Mandrel chassis, I'm a lot more confident this thing can be produced in numbers. Um, a lot of little stuff like that, as I said before, after going into the steering, going into the interior, that's going to happen soon. So I ordered, I don't know if you're into 3D printing or not, if you're watching this, but I ordered one of those new bamboo printers, which is a big deal. It allowed me to do a lot of interior stuff in one shot. A lot of the front fascia, exterior parts I can print in one shot now. Headlight bezels, running lights, a lot of that stuff now. It's going to come in so handy. It should show up just in a couple days here. That's going to be huge. Just having two printers is going to be huge. I have some parts now I'm working on that are just still on the print bed that I have to put off and install. I'm going to do that right after this. Yeah, I've gotten a ton of good advice from manufacturing people and from welders. So I'm feeling really good about it. I've been coming up with some marketing and business schemes in the meantime as well. I'm getting a lot deeper into the business side of it, a lot deeper into the legislative side. So the next video, before I continue, the next video will be in the garage. The rear mock-up is on the way, which is huge. I've learned a lot about mock-ups doing this one. And so that's on the way. I'm going to be able to mount the engine in it, hopefully. Mount the diff in it, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's just going to be a huge deal. And then once I have that done, I'm dangerously close to ordering the entire aluminum chassis and welding it up. I need to get a 50 amp 240 installed in my garage for the welder. So I got to call and get that figured out. But yeah, before I end the video here, let me just give you a brief, this is exciting and frustrating at the same time. Let me just give you a brief kind of overview of the legislative side of this. This isn't actually on the list, so excuse me if I start rambling. But so the business side of this is interesting because the whole selling cars thing is like hard in the US. It's like, oh, you want to officially sell cars, you got to crash them all, like millions and millions of dollars. Basically what you want to do is sell kit cars, which is fine. But there's a lot of questions around selling kit cars that no one really tells you. So one thing I was curious about was, how assembled can you sell a kit car? Like, if you're a kit car manufacturer, can you sell somebody the engine and transmission too, as long as it's not installed in the car? The answer to that is no. But again, no one tells me that. So I joined SEMA, and I gave them a call, and they're like, one of their head legislative people got on the phone with me and talked me through a lot about it. And so you can sell a kit car as complete as you would like. It just can't have an engine and transmission. That's fine if you're selling a pure ICE car, like a traditional kit car. That's cool. And it's good news, So I could sell the car without a drivetrain, just almost complete. All the person has to do is install the engine and transmission, which in a bike engine is really easy because you're usually in one module. The even more interesting side of this is that NHTSA has this thing called a request for clarification. So if they haven't made a rule on something, or if they have made a rule but you're curious about the details, you can ask them about it. When I was talking to this guy at SEMA, he basically said that, so my car is a hybrid, of course. So I was like, well, if I ask somebody to assemble their own hybrid system, like, oh, you have to buy your cells and put the traction battery together, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't want to do that. So I asked him, I'm like, well, can I sell this car with a traction battery? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, what does NHTSA consider the actual drivetrain component, essential drivetrain component of an electric vehicle, hybrid vehicle to be? And he said, I don't know. As far as I can tell, NHTSA has never actually and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Through my research, NHTSA has never actually clarified what the essential drivetrain components of an electric vehicle are in the context of a kit. And as a result, I don't know if this is because people think electric cars are complicated or dangerous to assemble or what, or it's because of this legislation, but there are effectively no electric kit cars for sale in the United States, which seems like if you could get a motor and drive unit from Cascadia, you can hook those straight up to a differential. If you already had a traction battery installed in the car, that would be really easy. Especially as compared to installing like EFI or something on an engine. You'd be like, oh my God. But NHTSA has never answered that question. So it's like, so I emailed them and I haven't gotten a response. Who knows if I ever will get a response. But I feel like I need to, so I'm just going to be calling them pretty much over and over again. But I thought that was so interesting that they've never actually clarified that. So effectively, I have to find that out, because if I can sell this vehicle with a traction battery installed, that would be great. And especially in my case, because I'm using LTO, I can discharge it to like 0 volts or 12 volts or whatever, and make it completely safe for somebody to install because it's not a high voltage battery. So even if I can sell it as an accessory, that would be nice. But again, if I can sell it in the car, that'd be huge. And the other thing to think about is the Low Volume Vehicle Manufacturers Act. I'm definitely getting that wrong. It's like Low Volume Motor Vehicle Manufacturers Act, I think it is. But I asked him about that, the NHTSA guy, and he was involved in it, and it's like hairy how it turned out, but you can kind of do it with EVs, but CARB and whoever else drags their feet on it, so it's like, it's a whole can of worms, but I'll be giving you future updates on that too. But the business side of it, I'm thinking a lot about it. I'm coming to some good solutions. So yeah, so that's where I'm going to end this video. Again, I'm working on so many things going forwards. Next time I'll probably be in the garage. I'll cover some suspension stuff in here too, which I'm currently working on. I should be ordering coilover soon, hopefully. That would be really nice. That would be a nice thing to finalize. Getting all those stuff mounted and everything, that would be really, really cool. Hopefully I can get that figured out soon. Pedals, all kinds, just a million things. Again, I'm going off script here, so I'm sorry if I'm rambling. But yeah, so I'll talk to you guys next time. I'll have a ton more to share. A lot of exciting stuff going on, a lot of parts arriving. So thanks for hanging around. Again, sorry for the length of time between videos. Won't be like that next time. And yeah, I really appreciate it. So thanks for watching.